First of all, thanks so much for everyone who's here right now, and also to those who registered and will be watching it afterwards. I just want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded and we'll be posting this video afterwards, so you can review it. You can also share with other team members as needed. One thing I want to point out is that this is an introductory webinar. So what that means is it's part of a series of webinars that addresses the basic functionalities of Microsoft Teams. And today we'll be focusing on the basic features. So if you are familiar with Party Matrix already, you may see some of these as being redundant, but at the same time, it's a really good refresher as well. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Hai. I'm co-founder of Affluence. My contact is here, hi@affluence.com. If you have any questions or feedback from about this webinar, please reach out to me. I'm really keen to hearing your feedback, what I can do better, and then also what else I can address as we walk you through the journey of Party Matrix and help you prioritize. So a little bit about Party Matrix. One of the things that I think is really important to understand is that Party Matrix is about prioritization. So it's not just a project management software, it's not just a task management software, but it's really about helping you understand what you need to work on at any point in time. And that's the idea around Party Matrix. And so we think that out there, you have so many different sources of data, everything coming from emails to meetings. So Party Matrix creates a one centralized place for you to get a real-time status and understanding of what your priorities are across your entire project. I also want to talk about what makes Party Matrix different. First of all, what we do is we use the 4-quadrant methodology, which I'll dive further in, as the core methodology behind the philosophy of Party Matrix to help you prioritize better and actually understand what it is that you need to work on and communicate your priorities across the entire organization. And that's really key. The second is Party Matrix is the only solution out there that is Microsoft 365 security certified across our web app, Microsoft Teams app, as well as our web app. So if you're in IT, this is something that you can use to make sure that you can easily approve Party Matrix for your organization. And if you're not in IT, that's something you can share with your IT organization to help get Party Matrix approved for you as well as other team members. The other aspect about Party Matrix is over the last several months, we've started enhancing the capabilities around Party Matrix to leverage AI to help you become more productive. There's so many ways to use AI, and we're really excited about taking some of those capabilities to help you achieve your goals more effectively. We also have very different view on how you look at prioritization. And so not everything belongs in a project, right? Not everything belongs in one area. You have so many data sources spanning across so many different spectrums, so many different areas of responsibilities. One of the things that we're able to do is create this one-on-one view, which is a people-centric view for you to understand what you can work on for your manager or for your colleague at any point in time. We also can help you save a lot of effort with templates. That's one of those things where Party Matrix allows you to not have to waste time doing the same thing over and over again, especially if you have a routine, an SOP, or processes that you want to use over and over again. And then finally, just a note, today I'll be talking about Party Matrix as a SaaS solution, which again is our web app. You can use it across your organization. But for those who are not aware, we also have a HIPAA compliant solution, as well as an Azure government cloud solution. And of course, for enterprise customers, manage private Azure deployments as well. So if any of these other topics interest you, please ping me or send a message to support at Affluence, and I'd be happy to talk to you further. For those who just joined us just now, I do want to let you know that there is a chat section. And so if you have any questions at any point in time, please send me a message in the chat section on this webinar. I'll take a look at it when I get a chance and make sure that I address some of those questions that you may have. And it's always very good to be interactive. So if there's any feedback whatsoever, please send it in the chat. So let's start from the beginning about the fundamentals behind Party Matrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to a former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, one thing that's really the takeaway from here is that every single day, we're inundated with so many different new things, right? That, in the morning, I look at my emails and I get 30 new emails. How many of those are actually important? Vast majority are not. And so we get all these tasks that's coming to us day in, day out, and that's the urgent aspect of it. And it's just poking you over and over again and really takes away our focus. And the core belief in this philosophy is that if you look at everything you have to do, imagine if I asked you to take a piece of paper right now, start writing down, jotting down everything that you think you have to do today or this week or this month or this quarter at your work or even in your personal goals. And then from there, I asked you what to choose. What are the things you should work on right now? Do you start at the top of that list, or do you start at the bottom of that list, or do you start somewhere random in the middle? And that's the challenge we have. That list gets so long, and when you add something to it, again, what do you put in that list? So the idea of behind this philosophy is to take all those things that you have to do and split it into a 2x2 matrix. And that 2x2 matrix has a very simple dimension of, let's just call importance and urgency. That's one approach that some have gone with. And so then you suddenly have, okay, what are the things that are important and urgent? That's what I should do now. And then what are the things that are important but not urgent? Those are the things I should plan for. And then what are the things that I can actually delegate or ask someone else to do? And then finally, what are the things that I should put on the back burner or maybe not even do at all, get rid of completely? So if we're to do that, what happens is you get this matrix, and those are the things that are due now. Those are the things that are planned for, the delegate, the inbox. And so you've taken that list and you've turned it into this prioritization matrix. And here's the next part that's actually really, really interesting, which is I'll ask you to go and take this matrix that you've written down on a piece of paper, walk around the office and compare notes, right? You talk to your manager, hey, by the way, these are my priorities. What do you think? You talk to your colleague, hey, these are my priorities across all these projects I work with you. What do you think? And you talk to your direct reports, hey, these are my priorities. Let me see yours. So if you start comparing notes, what do you see? Do you see that you agree with everything? Well, if you do, then that's fantastic. You don't need a priority matrix. If everyone at your organization knows exactly what they need to work on at any point in time, you do not need our software. You don't need any software whatsoever. You just go and execute. But if you do find discrepancy and you start seeing that, hey, you know what, some of these priorities are actually different than what I think is important and so forth, then suddenly you have a starting point for you to have a conversation around your priorities and what is that you should really be working on. And at the end of the day, that's what Priority Matrix is. Priority Matrix as a software is a digital version of this matrix. And then second of all, it's a communication tool that one, it communicates to you what you should work on, right? So don't get distracted by the things in quadrant 3 and 4. Work on the things that's quadrant 1, and then ideally that's empty, so then you can work on quadrant 2, the things you'd be planning for, right? That's how you should be spending your time. So that's the first thing. It communicates to you where you should spend your time. The second thing, it communicates to everyone else at your organization what are the priorities that they should have and how you can actually create alignment. So the 4-quadrant, the Eisenhower Matrix then makes it very, very transparent on what it is that you should care about. And my argument is that it is the hardest part in all of this. So if it is not easy for you to take all those things you've written down and put into the matrix, well, that's the point. Because if you can't make a decision, how can anyone else make a decision for you on what the priority should be? So success from using Priority Matrix is about discovering those disagreements. And I think that as you're looking at our software and as you're looking to apply it to your work, both your work and your life, as well as managing critical projects, everything from strategic goals for your organizations to the day-to-day stuff that you actually have to get done, make sure that you're using it as that communication tool. As I mentioned to many of you in the beginning here, this webinar is recorded. And if you go to our website, affluence.com/webinars, you'll see some of the other webinars that we have recorded as well. And then I mentioned my contact, hi at Affluence, but now there's also support at Affluence. If you have any questions, please send a message there. And with that, I'm going to jump into the actual product itself. As mentioned, if you have any questions whatsoever, please send in the chat, and I'll try to my best to address during the demo here. So now I'm going to jump to a live demo of Priority Matrix on the web app. Okay, so this is what Priority Matrix looks like. So you should be able to see my screen here. I have a very, very basic display of Party matrix, in this particular case, I have a slightly different quadrant names and what I mentioned to you, the do now plan, right? I call it critical immediate, critical but not immediate, but the idea is the same. So when you use party matrix, essentially you have this 4-quadrant box. And as you hover over each of these, you're able to add tasks very, very easily. In Party Matrix, we call it items. And the reason we call it items is because not everything is a task, because it could be resources like documents or whatever, and maybe they belong in different places. But to add a task, it's actually really, really straightforward. So imagine if I want to add an item here. So I want to follow up with webinar participants, right? So imagine if I after this, I want to send an email to all of you. So I set myself a reminder to do that. And that's how I create a task. But the way Party Matrix works is that we actually also use natural language to make it easier for you. And so if I just create a task, well, when do I do it? You know, am I going to do it right now or in 2 weeks? So I can just say do tomorrow. And if I do something like that, what happens is Party Matrix creates a task for me. Here it is in quadrant 4. And then afterwards, we use natural language, and it actually creates a due date for you. So I've just actually done 2 things in just 1 step. But imagine if now I understand that, wait a minute, you know what, this is actually something that's really critical and important. I'm going to go ahead and drag it to quadrant 1. And now in this particular matrix, I see what my tasks are. And if I were to start my day tomorrow, I would look at this like, hey, you know what, this is actually important and urgent. I got to get that done. And so I can see that. And the moment that I set a due date in Party Matrix, we actually get reminders that, hey, you actually have this on your calendar. Make sure you do it. Now you notice that when I create that task, on the right-hand side here, there's actually what's called the item details. So item details is essentially an expansion on the information, the metadata, et cetera, around that task. So for example, the top here is what project it belongs in. I can move it to a different project if needed. And then second, the name of the item. I might want to modify that later as needed. Next to that is star. When I star a task, what it does is actually say, hey, you know what? This is not only in a certain quadrant, but also I want a special report on it. I want to make sure that this is at the very, very top of my list. So that's another dimension of flagging something that says, you know what, this is critical. You can add icons. So for example, since this is follow-up and let's just say it's related to email, maybe I'll choose a phone call icon here, right? So that's following up with the webinar participants. And then right after that, I have owner. So what happens is every single task in Party Matrix has an owner, exactly one owner, not multiple owners, exactly one owner. And the owner is the icon, the avatar that shows up right here. The idea behind this is that it's about responsibility. So earlier, when I talk about your personal task, well, that's great. That's you. You're the owner. But imagine as you start using Party Matrix more and you want to communicate to others, hey, this is my task, but this is, you know, Bob's task, this is Tom's task, etc. Then you want to know who the owner is. We don't want multiple owners because you want to have a very clear responsibility who that person is. But there might be people who are actually relevant to this particular task, and they're called followers. So a task may have one owner, but multiple followers. And if you want to add followers to a task, you click on this plus icon, and then you can choose someone else who might be relevant to this particular task. And then after that, you have progress. So for example, 0 to 100%. 100% means something is done. And then you have effort. How long does that take? Not all tasks are created equal. And then you have due date, as I mentioned earlier. But then there's also something called reminders. And the way reminder works is, let's just say you have something to do in 2 weeks. But if you wait 2 weeks to get it done, well, that's not going to work because you'll be late for that. So reminder reminds you to actually get started earlier, right? So for example, because I have this follow-up with webinar participant due tomorrow, I can actually set a reminder, right? Let's go ahead and set a reminder for me today. So then I remember to go ahead and take a look at this later. Okay, so now I have the reminder set. And so in 3 hours, the system will send me reminders. Hey, by the way, you should get started on this. So then you can actually meet your deadline. And then as you look down further, there's 3 additional options here within the Party Matrix item detail. The chat. What the chat is you can think of it as 2 things. One, the history of the changes. So the way Party Matrix works is we actually create a full history of all the changes that you have related to every single task. And the reason for that is for you to review. Imagine if you're working on a particular task and then you're changing the priority level, you're adding notes and you're inviting other people, you're having conversation around it. But in 6 months, when you look at it again, will you remember the reasons you make some of those changes? or who you assign it to, or why you change the due date. And so the chat is a way for you to have that immutable, that unchanging history, so you can look back and then understand, oh, hey, I made this decision because of XYZ. And then importantly, if you bring on someone new, someone completely new to the organization, they can jump into Party Matrix right away and get the full context and understanding of how decisions were made, what priorities are for every single task, and when they were moved around, et cetera. So this is not something you can achieve with emails. This is not something you can achieve with a wiki document or any basic task management software. So that's the chat. The second way to use the chat is a way to communicate to others. So instead of just sending a message inside Teams or having a conversation in the meeting, you can actually send messages to everyone in this particular task, and they can look at it and have an understanding of the decisions, again, that's made around here. The second part of it is notes. So notes is just adding additional notes to the task itself. It's not intended to be a rich text place where you can go and do all sorts of fancy stuff. You have Microsoft Word, you have Google Docs for that. You can just link that into Party Matrix instead. The notes section is just for you to add some details around the task itself. The other thing you can do with notes is actually you can create subtasks. So I can go and I can do subtask 1, subtask 2, subtask 3, right? So I can create subtasks inside Party Matrix and for each of these action items. And then lastly, there's the resource section. The resource sections allows you to go and attach additional information into the item itself. Could be files, could be images. Example, let's just say you want to have an email and take that email and have it as a task. Well, you want that email attached into Party Matrix here. So then later on, you look at this, you can know exactly what that email was. Or maybe you ask someone to, could you review this particular report? That's the way it works too. So you can link to your intranet, you can link to a Google Docs, you can link to a Microsoft Word document, you can upload them if needed, etc. And that goes into the resource section. Furthermore, in the resource section, I won't go too much into the details. The resource section, you can actually link to other Party Matrix tasks as well. So Party Matrix allows you to actually link action items together, create dependencies. Let's say you got to get this done, A done first before B, and then Party Matrix will automatically build Gantt charts for you. That's something that we can address in a more advanced webinar. But you can think of the resource section as a way to add a lot more details than what you can possibly add in the chat or note section. Now, if I were to go back to the chat section, you can see that actually the record is kept for me here, right? I create a new subtask 1, 2, and 3. And right now the progress is 0. One thing I can do is as I mark the task as done, you'll see that the way Party Matrix works is if you don't manually override the progress, if you create 3 subtasks, I get mark 1 as done, well, it's 33% done. So that's automatically captured for you as well. And so that's basically what an item detail is. So you can think of it as a way for you to just add more information as needed, but you can also see that actually none of this was absolutely crucial. All you needed was the task, the quadrant, and the owner is automatically selected. So now let's take a look at this bigger picture. Imagine if you want to go and you want to start customize some of these projects, so then it maybe resonate a little bit more with you. Earlier, I showed the do now, the plan as the quadrant name. Well, if I click on this little eye icon here, I open what's called the project details. When I open the project details, I can change the name of the project. But the second thing I can do is I can invite team members. So when you first create a project in Party Matrix, it actually starts out as just a project for yourself. So that's the most basic level, right? And so this is a project that's only you in it. You're the only person who can see the task in it. And it could be your personal task. It could be the things you need to do for your work, et cetera. You can have as many projects as you like in Party Matrix. But what you can also do is you can invite others to it. So imagine if you have a particular initiative for this quarter, you can go create a project and then click on this plus icon and invite additional team members into this. The moment they're invited and they join this particular project, they can see all the tasks in it. And so that's how the permission control works. So if someone can see the task, if someone is in a project, they can see those tasks and be able to see the same priorities as you do. And then that's when you can discuss and you can move things around as needed. And then down here, you have the quadrant name. So I have critical immediate, but I actually can change this and customize this. I can call this do now, do later, delegate, and then my inbox. And so you can see that what happens is as I change that, the quadrant name changes here. And so as you use Party Matrix more, maybe there's some matrix quadrant names that resonate with you better. And the reality is everyone works in different ways. So there is no single way that we can create alignments across the whole organization. And so even different teams, different departments actually have very, very different terminology that they may use in their quadrants. And so Party Matrix gives you that flexibility. So if I were to pause a moment, this is where I would say that you get 80% of the value out of Party Matrix with 20% of the work. 80% of the value comes from, one, creating projects with the appropriate quadrant names, and then in there, inviting the appropriate people, and then writing down your priorities inside Party Matrix and making sure that everyone sees those priorities and create that alignment. Because if you start seeing someone within your organization with a different priority level than you, that's when you should have that discussion right away. That's when you should schedule that meeting to actually talk about it. And then when you're in that meeting, you can actually pull up Party Matrix and look at it and talk it through and move that item back and forth or whatever it is to the appropriate quadrant and then set the appropriate due dates. The second thing I want to suggest to you is make sure you set due dates. If you set due dates in Party Matrix, it shows up in a lot of other places. So I've shown you the quadrants here, but the way you can look at Party Matrix is there's a database of all the tasks you have, and then you have different views. So I can go to the list view. The list view takes everything that I have. Instead of displaying in a quadrant, I display in a list. It is very, very easy to see the tasks that are overdue, as well as the tasks that are assigned to you across the entire matrix. So when you go to this view, you can sort by each of these column name. The other view you have is the calendar view. So when you have a calendar view, all the tasks that have dates on it shows up on here. And then you can just click on the task and you can review what it is that you have to work on. And if you need to reprioritize it, or rather move it to a different date, you just drag it to a different day, and Party Matrix will automatically update the due dates for you. It updates the matrix for you. And then not only that, the whole record is kept here. The reason that record is kept is actually for a very important reason. Imagine if you assign a task to your coworker. Hey, could you do this by a certain date? But then they missed it, and so they changed the due date, and then they'll get it done later. Well, what happens is you want to make sure you know that the due dates has been changed, and so Party Matrix keeps a tally of that history of that record for you. And then we have the Gantt chart, and the Gantt chart is actually really, really straightforward. So Party Matrix is not one of those software that will go and make it extremely difficult for you to build out Gantt charts and create dependency and so forth. Party Matrix, all it's doing is it takes the information that you have and build that Gantt chart and visual for you. So I don't have to do any additional work here. Now I can go and add items, I can link them and so forth, but Party Matrix just visualizes that. And then finally, you have this thing called the feed. So you can think of the feed as a history of all the changes I have within this project. Again, for the purpose of creating transparency across your team as well as your for yourself. And so always be able to see what is it that matters. Okay, so that's the matrix. That's the item. So now let me show you how to create more matrices, more projects. So we call them projects, but the reality is they can be a lot more than projects. They can be goals, they can be initiatives. And the way I look at it too is there's at least two types of projects. The first is your transient project. So what a transient project is has a sort of a start date and end date, right? Let's say if you're a consulting firm and you bring on a new customer, and a client, and that client starts July 1st and ends September 30th. Well, that's a transient project because everything you have to do in that project, you've got to get done. So when you create a project in Party Matrix, you can just create that, you can have the quadrant and so forth, but your goal is to finish that project, and then when you're done, you can archive that. And then the second is more persistent. And persistent means these are something that sticks around. So for example, actually in my Party Matrix, I have 300 plus projects. That means I have all types of projects, transient as well as persistent. And within our own organization, we have projects for each of our software application. And this is an unending list of things to do. So you can look at it as a persistent project that never finishes. And in fact, the number of tasks and action items in there will keep growing. So when you use Pretty Matrix, just in the back of your mind, when you create a project, just think, hey, you know what? Is this a transient project or a persistent project? So this is how you create a project. Go here, click on project. If you click on show our project here, it shows you the whole list of projects. So this is my list of project, and then I choose add project. When I add a project, I have a couple of choices. First of all, when you use Pretty Matrix for the first time, you're going to see just this blank project. But if you go down here to public templates, you can actually also see some templates we've created for you. And these are some best practices we've seen over time, and we add to this slowly. But for example, 30, 60, 90-day plan is actually pretty popular because if you're a new manager, choosing this particular matrix just creates different custom project names or quadrant names for you. So then you can think about what are the things I can do as a manager, as a new manager to ensure my success. Very, very straightforward. You don't have to go and learn anything new. You simply choose that. But I'm going to go ahead and choose a blank project here. So I'll call it new project, and I can do a new project. I can add notes to this project if needed. User group, you can think of user group as like departments. So for example, maybe sales or marketing or engineering or something like that. And the way it works with user group is that you can go and say that, hey, this particular client works with all of these folks, right? And so when you create a project with that user group, as you add more and more team members to the user group, they automatically get access to the appropriate projects. So you can think of it as permission control. And then when someone leaves that group, then they lose access to those projects as well. So I have no user group. I'm not going to select a user group. And then I can have, again, some different types of matrices. These are basic blank matrices. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Eisenhower Matrix, and then I can choose a color theme as needed. That's how I add a project. Very, very easy, very, very straightforward. And now I open up and you can see how this is the exact same view I have earlier on what is inside of projects. And so when you use Pretty Matrix, make sure you just create a couple projects. My suggestion is one, create a project for your personal goals. Create a project for the key initiative that you're working on this quarter, right? Whatever that may be, depending on your job function. And then create a project that you can share with your manager. So then everyone can be on the same page. And so that's something that you can share with others. So then you guys can both look at it. So with that, I'm going to pause here for a second. And again, I do want to mention that if there's any questions, you can send in the chat. Now, I want to step back and I want to talk about a little bit about our integrations and some of the things that we do. So Party Matrix is probably the most integrated solution inside the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. And there's a simple reason for that, which is, I mean, you're using Teams right now to join this webinar, but a lot more organizations are using Teams. One of the things that we found is that you get so many different applications and then you end up being pulled in so many different places. The context switching is really, really damaging to your ability to focus. And this happens to me all the time because, you know, there's just so many places that's tugging and pulling you and so forth. So one of the things we've done with the Microsoft integrations is try to create Pretty Matrix and put it in the place where you can switch to Pretty Matrix sort of mindlessly and without having to switch context. And so that is why we develop our Microsoft Teams and Outlook integrations. So I'm going to go now and show you very, very quickly our Microsoft Teams and Outlook integrations. First, I'll start with Outlook. And the reason I start with Outlook is actually this is probably one of our most popular applications. It's because we're constantly challenged by email management. As mentioned, you know, I get so many emails on a daily basis. I simply can't flag them. If I flag them, it keeps adding up. So it's if you have 5 flag emails, great. If you have 500 flag emails, that's really not going to help you. So the way Pretty Matrix works is you can take any email and convert it into a task. So to install Pretty Matrix for Outlook, simply click on this icon up here in your Outlook 365. When you do that, you can search for Pretty Matrix, and then after you install Pretty Matrix, you're able to open it up onto this right panel. So I'm going to close this and show you how that's done. So let's just say if I have an email, and this is an email that I got, let's just assume that this is an email that I got that's very important, and now I want to go and actually create a task around it. I click on this ... icon here and choose Pretty Matrix and open Pretty Matrix. Now I want to show you quickly that actually You see, I have a couple of different options here. So when you install Matrix, just make sure that you install the standard Matrix app, because there's also the HIPAA app and the government app. And so the blue icon versus green and orange, just in case you're confused. If you do use the different software, the different platform, then of course those are all independent. So if you use the government app in Teams, then you want to use the government app in Outlook, and you want to use the government app in a web app as well. So keep that in mind. But I have the standard app here. I'm going to open Matrix. And what happens is on the right-hand side, I get this panel on my Outlook that allows me to take an email and capture that email. What capturing email does is it creates a task. And so instead of just flagging an email, what I'm doing is I'm actually going to go and create a task. And the way it works with the task is I can do all of those things that I showed you earlier, which is one, I can have the task name, right? Which is follow up with this email, okay? And then the second part of it is I can actually choose what quadrants it belongs in. So if I go to here, earlier I created, what is it? New test project, a new project right there, right? That's the project I created during this demo. I choose that project, and then I choose what quadrant it goes in. So go ahead and choose quadrant 4 here. And then this is the cool part, which is I can actually assign this task to somebody else. And the reason is simple, which is one, sometimes I get an email and I want to prioritize it for myself, but maybe I want to go and assign that to another teammate, because again, if it's an external email that's really important, I want to make sure that the appropriate folks are involved and actually they know that they are actually responsible for this. And so I can choose a person, right? And so go ahead, I'm going to choose somebody else here. And then I can choose the due date. Again, I'm going to change this due date here. And then I can set effort, etc. There's an option to extract action item, and this is one of those AI element that we're adding sort of on a passive side. The reason why we do that is, again, use AI if it helps you, but this is one of those options where it tries to extract the action items for you from inside that email. Nothing is perfect, and there's that caveat, and we never, promise that everything works out perfectly. But the way Matrix does it is it goes and created the action items as appropriate for you, and hopefully help you save time. Anyways, I go back to here, I create action item, and voila, I get this item details here. I've prioritized this email. And then if you notice on the email itself, the Party Matrix tag shows up. And so what that means is that this email has been prioritized. And so if I were to go back here and I open the same panel again, you see how that capture email option has gone away. And instead I get the option to open the item. So then I don't go and prioritize the same email over and over again. So there's a couple of these email Outlook integrations out there, and they try to go and help you create tasks, but that's all they do. They just help you create more and more tasks without actually helping you understand the status of your existing task for that email. So with Matrix, it's intelligent enough to know that, hey, you prioritize this email already. Click on here and you'll see the status of it. But the other thing I want to mention too that's also unique to Matrix for Outlook is the ability for you to take this email and attach an existing task, because maybe you get an email and you have an existing task for that client or for that particular action item. Well, instead of going and creating another task, you can actually just hover over an existing task. You can search for them here and then just attach. And so what that does is it takes the email itself, the EML file, and attach to that task. And now anyone who's in that task in that project can see the email. So if you forward an email, the problem with forwarding email is you have a thread, but then if you have multiple emails, now you've just created multiple threads and you've completely lost track of everything. So with Matrix, you're able to attach multiple emails to one single action item, allowing you to have a centralized place to understand everything that's relevant within the context of that task, within the context of that project, within the context of that email. So that's how it works. And if I were to go back to this project here, you see that email shows up right here, right? It assigned to the appropriate person. It set the appropriate due dates. It has the notes from the email itself. There's a resource section, the email file. Very, very easy for me to turn an email into a task and delegate it. And now I know that this email won't be dropped, right? Because it's assigned, there's due dates for it, and if it's not done, it will show up in overdue, and the system will send reminders to ensure that you actually get it done. Very, very powerful way to capture that. Now, the second part is in the Microsoft Teams integration. So I'm going to show you how Microsoft Teams integration works. So if you want to install Matrix, go to the App Store here and again, search for Matrix. Once you do, Matrix shows up right here and you right click on it and pin. Again, there's different versions of Matrix, right? I have a HIPAA version here. I have the standard version here. And then once you do, you see this entire Matrix project view inside Microsoft Teams itself. What's nice about this is I don't have to switch app. I can actually do this all inside Microsoft Teams. If you use Teams on the mobile device, we also are one of the very few integrations that works inside Teams on mobile as well. So you can see your entire Party Matrix on your phone inside Teams, and we were the launch partner with Microsoft to bring that to your Android device as well. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to go into the details into the Teams app here because it's very, very similar in terms of interface, right? I go to project list, I see the quadrants, and then I can click on this, I see the details. But there's a couple of things that we can do inside Teams that we can't do anywhere else. Let me show you. For example, I go to this chat. And again, this is one area that I would love to encourage you to do if you get a chance, which is when you go to here and imagine if you have your various coworkers on the left-hand side here, maybe your manager, maybe your colleague that you work with so many different projects, and you go to this plus icon, and when you choose Party Matrix, you get two options. The first is the ability to add what's called a one-on-one view, which is the ability for you to actually with this person that you work with inside Teams, see all the tasks you have in common with them. And then the second is a full project view. So let's just say earlier I made a suggestion, maybe you can create a project that you can share with your manager. Well, let's just say you have that project. You can go to this, invite your manager, and now you don't even have to switch to Party Matrix. You can just go to this tab and see all the tasks you have within that project. But what I want to show you is a one-on-one view, which I think is a very, very unique and powerful feature. I already have it installed, so I'm going to open it. You see, I've Eugenia selected here, and inside this chat, Eugenia in the one-on-one here, I can literally see all the tasks I have in common with her across my entire Party Matrix, regardless of projects. And so the way you can imagine this is, right, we have all these projects, all the tasks associated with it, and you have multiple projects with multiple tasks. But if you work with someone, how do you know what are the things you have to do for them? If there's so many different projects, you have to switch the project and so forth. So Party Matrix flips that whole thing around and gives you a people-centric view. And so that's what this is right here. It's a people-centric view where it finds everything in common between two people. And so when I go here, I can see all the tasks I have. And so you see it's a lot more than what I showed you earlier inside of Matrix. And not only that, I can see all the due dates, and I can sort by due dates very, very easily. Imagine if this was my manager and I go to here and I have this conversation and then we start talking about, hey, by the way, what are you working on? What are your priorities? Well, I can literally pull this up, show my manager and have a conversation and say, by the way, like these are all the things I have on my plate. You know, which one do you want me to work on? Like, hey, can we move the change of due dates for these other tasks and so forth? Very powerful way to stay aligned. The second cool thing is the ability to add tasks directly from here. One thing we've seen over and over again, and think about the last time this happened to you. You go in a meeting, you talk about all these amazing things you're going to do, and then afterwards, 2 weeks later, you have a conversation, and someone asks, "By the way, what was the status of that?" And suddenly the answer is like, "Oh, I forgot to write that down." Right? And so with Party Matrix, we encourage you to use this capability to add shared tasks, so then you can actually add the task as you have that meeting. Perhaps if it's a web call or whatever, you can go here, add a task. And so, for example, check in with Tom, do tomorrow, right? So if I do something like that right here, I can actually create the task directly, set the due date already by using the natural language, and then also my manager's assigned, and then I'm added as a follower, so I get a status update on this, and then all I have to do is choose what project it belongs in. And so I can choose the project from here, and then which quadrant it belongs in, right? The do now or do later, and I click on add. And that's pretty much it, allowing me to add tasks really, really rapidly without having to switch context. The other thing that I think is really powerful in terms of our integration with Microsoft Teams is the ability for you to actually just convert any chat into a task. So again, you're talking to your manager and the person say, hey, I actually have a message here, could you follow up with Tom? I can literally just hover over this ... choose create Party Matrix action item, and you can create the task directly from that conversation you've just had with that person when they ask you to do something, right? You don't have to switch a Party Matrix. You don't have to switch to another application. You can create the task at to the appropriate quadrant, create the appropriate due date directly from here. One of the most amazing thing about this particular integrations is the ability to link back to the moment in time when you had these conversations. So I don't know if, again, this really depends on your organization and so forth. But imagine if you created a task and then six months later, you go back and say, wait a minute, what was our conversation around that entire task? I lost context. With Party Matrix, it actually creates a link back to that moment in time inside Teams when you had that conversation, so you know about the context. This is such a powerful way to remind yourself why you ask someone to do something, etc. So Party Matrix, link that back to that message in that moment in time. The other thing you can do inside Party Matrix too is the ability for you to share tasks directly here. Again, this is one of those integrations inside Teams. And so if you go to here and you choose Party Matrix, you can actually attach Party Matrix as action items, right? So I can do that and attach those action items. And what's neat about this is then my teammate can look at this, view the item or save it, or if they have the appropriate permission, they can mark it as done, etc. So that's our integrations inside Teams. Now we have a lot more capabilities as well that we don't have the time to go through, but we will have a webinar that's more of a deep dive into the Microsoft Teams. But for example, I want to show you too, which is, for example, if you go to the App Store here and you search for Party Matrix, if you search for Party Matrix, one of the things you'll notice is that we have the various applications, but also at the same time we have workflow. So actually, we're one of the launch partner for workflow inside Microsoft Teams, allowing you to create sort of like an if this and then that environment. So as a way to actually again increase your productivity as you think about all the automations that you can do as you use Party Matrix more and more. So with that, I'm going to jump back into Party Matrix because I want to talk about again, how you can get value the most out of Party Matrix today. Because as you can see, there's a lot of capabilities that may or may not be relevant to you today. And what happens is each person here at in this conversation will use Party Matrix in a slightly different way, and each team will use Party Matrix in a different way. So my recommendation, going back to Party Matrix, is when you open up Party Matrix, again, create a project for those various areas of responsibilities that I mentioned, your personal tasks, the things you have to do with your manager, as well as your critical project. Invite the appropriate people, start writing down the task in there, make sure you set due dates automatically, so then the system will send you the reminders as needed. And then from there, use that as a way to start your day, and you look at it and understand where you need to focus your time. And if you do that, then you will be able to communicate to everyone else what the priorities are. And I think that you'll get the most out of Party Matrix. After that, you can take some of these advanced capabilities and adapt it to your specific needs, because every organization might be able to leverage Party Matrix in a different way. Okay, so I see some questions. Let me take a look here in the chat. Is it possible to assign RACI to resources? In terms, we don't have any specific way for you to do that, but one thing you can do is you can tag Party Matrix action items. So for example, let's say I have a task here. There's a tag section. If you tag Party Matrix, you can create what's called hashtag, right? So imagine if in Party Matrix you can create these different hashtags, and it's just a way to organize and classify tasks beyond just the item name and beyond the icons here and beyond the starring. And so you can think of this as just a way, actually, in fact, if I star something, it gets a special tag called star. And so when you use Party Matrix with other methodology around process improvements, etc., my recommendation is to actually tag it, and then from there on you can use it in the appropriate way. In terms of Party Matrix using Teams approval, in fact, actually that was one of the workflow suggestions that we had when we talk with Microsoft. So keep that in that's in the back burner. That's something that we might actually work on in the future. The second point around Party Matrix working with SharePoint, actually, what's really neat is Party Matrix also has what's called a Chrome extension and an Edge extension. When you use you can go again to the Edge App Store and the Chrome App Store, install Party Matrix, sign in with that. And if you're browsing on SharePoint, so let's imagine you're on SharePoint right here, you can click on Party Matrix and then convert that SharePoint page into a Party Matrix task. So if you were wanting to share a particular document, right, from SharePoint on your intranet, you just go to that SharePoint link and you can attach that link to a Party Matrix task or assign it to somebody. So we don't do any direct integrations or changes within SharePoint itself, but you can convert any SharePoint into a task or attach a SharePoint link. For example, let's say, imagine again, this is SharePoint. I can copy this link. I can go to here, paste it in the resource section. Right? And I can change the SharePoint name example. And so yeah, I'm able to create all of those different links here. And so have all of that come together. And so you can think of this as a way to point Party Matrix to various documents, and someone else can click on this and open the web page as needed. Now, there's a couple of things I didn't go over, which is, again, the ability for you to attach Word documents in it, and you'll get to Party Matrix preview and so forth. And then the other thing I want to mention for everyone here, too, is we do have some other webinars into the advanced capabilities around Party Matrix, email management in Party Matrix, as well as a deeper dive into the Microsoft Teams and Outlook. And so if you go to affluence.com/webinars, you can see those recorded webinars as well.